This is going to be a review of the current track of the day, Void by Speq, and I've played the map a little bit now, and I got 12th place.
12th place?
Always 12th place? If you're not getting 12th place, what are you really doing? But yeah, it's a plastic and tech track. I have Agrabou here with me to give his opinions, and we'll start off just by showing the world record here. We're going to have a lot of critiques, but just keep in mind that both of us think that it's a fine track in the end. We will be looking at how the map maybe could have been built better, some of the issues it has, what it does well, and possibly later on how it compares to a few other tracks. First off, let's look at the route. Now, the start's pretty nice. This is alright, and this first drift is kind of where I start having small issues, because it's really easy to hit this corner of the road. The optimal line is like exactly right here. Like, this is just the best place to enter the drift. So if this was one of those diagonal roadblocks that like was like half a block more and opens up to here, that would have probably been a bit better, because then you would have had a less restricted entry on the outside here. But the drift itself is nice, and this plastic section is fine too. It's kind of a zigzag. This drop is alright. I like this drift a lot. I think this is probably the best turn on the map, this drift right here. What do you think of this one, Agra?
I like it too. It flows pretty nicely. It's possible to fail, so you have to actually, like, you know, care about how you take it, but hitting it well leads to a pretty nice line and entry into the next part. It's good flow. Yeah,
the entry in the next part does work pretty well as well. Maybe it does slightly restrict you right here, because you end up having to steer straight a little bit as you exit it, because it was a little bit faster to go wider here and then hit the apex. But that's really a nitpick. And this section here, I think it exemplifies some of my issues with the plastic surface itself. Not necessarily this track, but just the plastic as a surface. Now, I'm generally not really a plastic hater. I think it's mostly a fine surface. But what happens when you have stuff like this, where you're trying to go in a mostly straight line and adjust for the next turn, is that if you enter no slide at all during it, you slow way down, because SCing is just so much faster. And so when you're trying to make these adjustments and get the correct line, you can't see your skid marks, and you just have to hope that you're getting the right SD angle. And if you no slide a little bit, then you've just, all your speed goes into the trash can.
I think part of that too is because the car turns so freely on plastic that it's able to set back into a neutral, aka no slide position really easily. Whereas,
yeah, that's
say
possible.
like on grass, like it takes a while for the car to turn, so when you're doing a slight thing, it's easier to stop yourself from no sliding, because it takes longer for the car to get into it.
I think something you said earlier is also pretty relevant here, which is that I agree that plastic works best when you're kind of oversteering a decent bit on it. It lets you turn really quickly, and you can use that to make some interesting combinations, but when you're just kind of driving mostly straight, I feel like some of the minor issues with the surface become more noticeable.
Yeah, it kind of starts to feel like this is something that could work better in, like, grass or dirt, you know, just as of the quirks of the surface.
Yeah, I would agree. Now, moving on to the last couple drifts here. It is a little tricky to keep grip on this block, but I think my larger issue is with this slide itself, right? So you're coming in here, there's not a ton of time to adjust, and as you're entering it, it's really hard to see where the actual apex of the turn is, because you need to be going very close to this point right here. And as you enter, it's kind of right in line with the other blocks and all these pulls, so you kind of just have to guess where you're supposed to be drifting, and barely tap as you enter it. It would probably be easier if you had more time on road as you enter it, but then it would be an entirely different turn anyway, so. And really, if you don't drive it perfectly, it doesn't flow well into the final drift either. You end up having to drive straight a bit, which, I mean, the final drift itself is fine, again.
Yeah.
And then there's this ending. You do get a little airtime here when you're, like, driving it fast and you turn to the right as you exit it, but I don't think that's an issue. It seemed fine when I drove it. This ending has a bit of a gear issue, though. When you're going fast, you can actually gear up right as you jump into the finish, and then you lose like 18 speed or something. You lose like half a tenth, which is a little annoying. You end up having to ST right to the point where you're going to gear up and then stop drifting. So it's just a little weird having to manage your speed without going too fast. So that's kind of the most objective issue with the track, I would say, even though it's, yeah, right at the end. The finish itself, though, is like, it looks nice. Yeah. Just jump into the sideways finish and all the purple stuff. Speaking of the purple stuff, I believe you had something to say about the scenery, Agra.
I do. There's been a specific, I'm gonna call it a genre of scenery, or like a building style of scenery, that I have complicated feelings about, because you look at all of this on the whole, and it's pretty great, right?
Yeah.
I feel like it's pretty cool, really well conceptualized scenery. However, look at the scenery that's within, say, about like a 1 block distance of the track, how much there is, or really how little there is.
Yeah.
There's very little up close scenery, and this isn't one of the bigger problem ones personally, because I think the stuff that is up close is still like creative and interesting enough and ties in to the outside. But I just wanted to note it because sometimes with these tracks, or like with this kind of style, you end up with a lot of focus on this like really big far away thing at the kind of like expense of the medium and the close-up scenery, which can sometimes, you know, when we're talking about like visual references, lead to that kind of thing, because, you know, it's up close, it's not as much to be able to base on.
Now, I have some things to say on this topic as well, but I will note one thing before we move on, which is that I am playing the map with a mod work folder right now, so I believe the sky is different if you play it on vanilla.
It is.
So just keep that in mind.
It is significantly tinted, much more purple than yours.
Yeah, actually, let me see if I can make that happen. So this is what it looks like if you are actually playing the map without any Nadeo bugs going on and ruining it. It's a lot more purple.
Yeah, but I think works better for the scenery.
Yeah, with the blue, it looked a bit worse. It didn't fit the, you know, the color palette as well.
Right.
But on the topic of the different kind of ways of making scenery around your track, this, like, there's the kind of way of doing it where you only build scenery close to the track and it's like fairly minimal, which is actually what most of the route itself here has. But that's kind of being combined here with the idea of making an entire sort of environment for your track to kind of live in, right?
Yeah.
Which I think that can work really well, and there's maps like people like Saffron come to mind, or Zephos, where they'll like fill the entire, or Squeaky especially. Squeaky's probably the best one.
Oh yeah, definitely.
They'll fill like the entire area with blocks, and they, I believe, do it a bit better in the sense that the stuff that's near to the track doesn't feel as independent, I would say.
Yeah.
From the big stuff, and you still get the idea of like, okay, this is a large build here. We made like some kind of Minecraft build, I guess.
Yeah, and especially and now that I'm looking at it too, some of like the details that are like the closer up stuff. So you got like the moving pipes, you have these light balls on poles, you've got some trees and stuff. You don't really, I could be wrong, but I'm looking around and you kind of don't really see those in like the bigger structure itself. So it feels a bit separate in that regard.
I don't think it's too bad in that regard, just because only a few trees. If I'm going to meet the track at where it's trying to be, I would say that it could have leaned more into some of the detail aspects that sort of more minimal tracks in the stadium tend to use. Like, for example, let's look at this part. This is, I believe, one of the parts where it's actually kind of failing a bit, where we have, on the outside edge here, there's nothing here. But, like, what can you add here? You've got, obviously, lights and stuff. He could have added some overhanging roads or something with the reset blocks, for example. Also, flags are an option. You can add custom purple flags on the side here. I personally love using flags to fill space. Stuff like this works well. He does a lot of this with the kind of purple blocks. There's also always the option of floating cubes, but I won't try to show the floating cubes too much here. But
you love a floating cube, though.
I know we've spent a lot of time talking about some of the negative aspects of the scenery, but overall, I do think it is really nice. I think it's a really good scenery on this track. Probably one of the better ones that we've seen in Track of the Day, at least in recent memory.
Definitely 100%. And I want to say as well that, like, when I say the style, like, I'm conflicted on the style. I think this is one of the better ones of doing it because there's still enough distinct close-up stuff that it feels like you still have scenery around it. I don't know if you'd want me to name the track in specific, but there's one example that always stood out to me as like, okay, what is going on here?
Yeah, we can actually look at that track to contrast it to this one. I think that would be helpful.
Oh, yeah, it's Isengard.
Okay, we can look at that. But just before we leave this one, I'll mention that this is, again, Void by Speq, September 23rd, Track of the Day. This was our review of it. Pretty good route. It's not really anything great, I would say. The scenery I do think is great. But yeah, it's a good track, I would say.
Yeah.
Nice pick from Nadeo for Track of the Day. It's fairly easy, I would think, for new players, but I don't know. I'm not a new player.
I think it should not be too bad for new players because everything, except for one part, which is the jump onto the sausage, which is still pretty easy, clear, but everything else is all connected.
Yeah, I guess I can see new players clipping the side of the road here. That might be a thing.
I think that would... I mean, you know, for new players coming in with less speed, that's going to be the hardest part, especially because it's also a transition, so you have to, you know, if you don't necessarily just instinctually know, okay, you want to jump to the left side of this sausage, like, for us, it kind of makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's true.
I will say, I'm noticing this right now, those two little sparklers on the ground are guides, and that's actually pretty cool.
That is pretty cool, actually, yeah. I guess if, for new players, if you would want to kind of guide them into the left side, as you mentioned, you could put, like, a pole on this side or something. But I don't know if, maybe that could be a little helpful.
Oh, there's one other scenery thing to mention here before we move on that's bad, and that's the Nadeo signs.
Oh, yeah. Guys, reskin your checkpoints. Really, it's yellow. It doesn't fit the purple. Just, like, make a 6x1 purple image and put the purple image on your checkpoints. Just
if you want to go really fancy, you can type the name of your track on it.
True. Or if you just want to be lazy, you can write out checkpoint on a gray or black background and use that on all your tracks. That's what Velt does.
Unless you are doing a yellow scenery, in which case I understand. I think Chlorine kept it right, the normal Nadeo stuff, and that worked really well there for the reason that
that was like
matches the scenery.
Using the yellow, so it was fine. I mean, it would still probably be better if it didn't say Nadeo, but it's not a detriment like I would say it is here.
Yeah.
I love this scaffolding, by the way. I think it's great. A little unfortunate that you can't see it while you're driving, but I think it's a really cool thing that I haven't seen before, like using this scaffolding across the entire route.
Yeah. I mean, I've done it before, but also that track was notoriously known as track where you can't see the cool scenery.
Ah, well, probably why I haven't noticed it.
Yeah.
Try again.
Ski, I actually am.
Wow.
That is actually a future project, is trying that again, but visible this time.
Anyway, let's check out Isengard, which is the other map Agra mentioned, as kind of contrasting to this map as like a worse way of doing this scenery, where it's more empty from where you're actually driving.
I think a part of it too is honestly like the layout of the scenery. The immediate first thing you're going to notice is that they're actually almost inverses, where Void has these really tall, large structures in a ring around the outside. Here we get one that's like a really big central tower, and then smaller stuff like descending in height as it goes around. But like, pay attention to the scenery that is close by the track here.
Yeah, it's like it's not a lot.
It's quite barren.
So I would agree with you in this case that like this is kind of a not very good implementation of the concept, especially compared to the Specs track.
Yeah, like now I know in this instance it's kind of well, so I know it's based off of a place from a movie, so I don't know if that brings in that kind of limitation to what can exist around the edges here, but yeah, I don't know. It's just like when you look at the stuff that's like close to the track and the close-up scenery, it's just kind of deficient and it feels empty, and also really the route never interacts with this central tower in any way.
That's true.
You just are looking at it from afar. I don't know if you want to spend the time to go to his follow-up, Minas Morgul. That one was also significantly better in that the route kind of actually like goes through and under some stuff and feels a bit more integrated.
I believe I remember this map as well. I didn't actually get a chance to play, but it seemed like quite a nice speed tech track, actually. Speaking about the route.
I feel like both of these tracks are nice. I like this one better.
Yeah, I like this one more, but the other map is a fine route as well. I think it's also pretty good speed tech.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. But like, I don't know, when you see this one, I mean, like, you have these like towers that are kind of close by. You come closer to a lot of the big architecture stuff, so that even though the close-up scenery is still generally kind of minimal, I mean, you're interacting a lot more with it. Like here, you're going under these arches, you're going under this bridge, you're seeing these like crystals poking through. Like it's a bit more play, so that when you have these more minimalist sections, it's like, okay, but now you're about to go back into here. So there's a bit more of that give and take.
I would agree. I think I agree almost entirely with that analysis, and also a pretty cool track overall.
Yeah.
I like Spec scenery more, but I think that's, in this case, more of a personal preference than a failure on the design of this track.
Yeah, no. Both of them are pretty meticulously laid out and everything, and I think at that point it kind of, personal preference.
So yeah,
like
this has been a review of the track of the day and some other stuff with Agrabou. So goodbye. Maybe we'll make more of these. Who knows?
Yeehaw.
Yeehaw! Put my cowboy hat on. And Agra says that there's something going on with the intro to the map.
Yeah, I mean, you just watch it.
Okay.
It's pretty fucking obvious when you see it.
Alright, let's see. How bad can it be? Oh, here it is.
Yes.
Ah. What is this syndrome? It's just trying to make you seasick, is that it?
That's just it. It's just one shot of like very far away spinning, and then one shot that's just like.
That sound effect is exactly what it looks like, yeah. And it's got a few of these sausage turns. It's such a dumb word for the blocks. When are we gonna find a better one? Why are team players so bad at naming things?
Well, there is an official name for them. It's bump.
It's not a bump though. It's like it's a ridge, not a bump.
I don't know what to tell you other than that is the name of the blocks in the like Nadeo lexicon.
Okay, well Nadeo's bad at naming them too.